I wanted to start by introducing our panel members that we have here today. We have an interdisciplinary panel of experts in the field on autism. Our first member is, to my right, is Brittany Neal. She is a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and parent of a child with autism. Next to Brittany, we have Dr. Molly Murphy. She joins us as the director of the Wiseman Center Autism Treatment Program. She is also a former satellite family child care provider. To Molly's right is Nicki Vander Meulen. She is a juvenile criminal defense attorney, and as a person with autism, Nicki has overcome adversity in her life and now advocates for children's mental health in the community. And to the right of Nicki, we have Ray Mendez. Ray is a parent of a child with autism and is a very active advocate for inclusivity in the Madison area school district. We are going to break this discussion into 3 overall larger topics. And we're going to start with the first topic is how to talk with parents about developmental concerns that you may have with some of the children in your care. So the first question I have, we are going to start with Nicki, is, I did want to say, before I forget, that these questions are based on the responses that you all gave when you registered for this event. So there was a question when you registered that said, what is one question you have for our panel of experts? So that's where these questions are coming from, is from your responses. So Nicki, I have a parent who does not believe that her son has a developmental delay. How can I support this child?
That's an excellent question. The key is not to just fight to convince the parent. It's to try to reach the child as much as possible, whether that may be extra reading sessions, extra listening sessions, maybe even some social training with other kids in an environment that's slow paced so that they can get used to it and learn the social rules. The key thing, especially at the younger ages in early childhood, is learning the rules of socialization. In this case, nowadays, individuals with autism may have a bit of an edge because we're used to living online. A lot of us are. Well, we have a group of kids who have grown up as pandemic kids who have been on the internet and have been on virtual learning. So some of the social skills are different. So you need to first focus on the child. The second thing you need to do is provide what you can support-wise to the parent. Realize that this could be seen as a judgment issue and that you are not judging them. And there's a lot of media out. Personal favorite is what I recently came across was remake of The Proud Family, and by its original creators, in which BB, youngest Quinn, is diagnosed with autism. And it shows how the parent wants to walk out because he thinks that they're calling his child stupid. They're not. And they explain exactly on what skills he has and what things will be good at. Focus on the positive. Don't focus on the negative. It's too easy to just say, oh, this will never happen. Getting into those type of debates are never going to happen and aren't going to work. There have been, to use my own personal story, I was supposed to be institutionalized at 6 because cerebral palsy and Asperger's wasn't really understood in the 80s. I got a law degree instead, and it depends on the amount of support. It doesn't depend on what people think.
Thank you, Nicki. Molly, how would you answer this question?
You could see my head nodding when Nicki was talking. So yes to everything that you've already heard. And I think mostly back to when I was a family child care provider when my own children were young. I really described myself as a partner in parenting, so that when families started with me, if their child was going to be with me for 10 hours a day, then I think I wasn't just a service that they were purchasing, I was really partnering with them in parenting. We were raising these kids together. And I think that put me in the mindset of, I have a parenting role here. And I think the idea of describing without judgment and being able to talk about, as Nicki was saying, the balance between what's easy in a day and what's hard in the day is really important. And I think that when you talk about kids, I think it's really important not to compare, because we know that development doesn't happen in this really easy planned ladder that goes up in the exact same way for everyone. So I think we've learned so much more now about child development and individual differences. So I think for parents to, and to be able to have those conversations right away, because if you're spending too much time worrying, but I think it's important for family child care providers to look this idea of that you have value in what you have in your observations. And if you describe what you see and you hear and what you experience during the day, I think that's a really supportive process for families.
In terms of the parents themselves, what I find is if I'm asked a lot of questions so that my thinking gets to it myself rather than I'm told. So, if I'm guessing, like if my child, we were aware of our kid being something was not typical. And it's the other way around for us, where I kept asking people, is he okay? And I kept being told, yes, he is. So I would have been open for someone to have said, there's something going on here as a parent. But one of my wife's best friends, her son, now we know is autistic, but we had to ask her a bunch of questions, like how's he doing in school? And then you start unearthing the things that they feel are not quite typical of the other kids, and that's one way to approach it, just asking a lot of questions. So that's about the parent. About supporting the child, I guess you just do what you would do. I like your words of co-parenting. If you look at it like that, I'm just going to support this child in any way in my case, so he would need it, and being open that it's not that he's not behaving badly, that there may be a deficiency there that you've got to look at and have an extra amount, I guess, of tolerance and patience and empathy, which is hard when you're tired. So I guess that's my response.
I do agree with everything that y'all have said, and I just want to highlight the importance of empathy in relationship and connecting with people. How do you support a child who you may think have a developmental disability? You have to really get close and connected with the parent as well. The parent is the connection there. We always tend to focus in on the child, which it is really important to focus in on the child. But being able to connect with a parent, because they're the ones that's going to go home and have to practice those skills. And then if they have multiple children, being able to teach those skills to the parent, or just modeling those skills. And it's a barrier. I'm coming from a more clinical therapy point of view right now, but when we take that time to get to know the parent and understand why the barrier may be there, we also learn as providers not to take it personal, because oftentimes we can have what we call countertransference, where we are very protective for that child or the children we support in our classroom. We want to love them and we want to be there for them. And then we speak to a parent and we feel like the parent is not receiving information from us. And then right away, I'm pretty sure the parents probably picking up on like, they mad I dismissed them or something like that. And then from there, it just creates more and more tension. And really it's about planting seeds with parents and building that trust up. And then, of course, supporting that child and meeting where they're at, which is empathy. And that's what the practice is. It's like we meet everybody where they're at and make sure their needs are being met, and just share with the parent what you're doing. You never know what they might take in and say, oh, I might try that at home. And then as a parent myself, I can count on how many times where someone just took the opportunity just to model something. They didn't say that what I was doing was wrong, because we are only doing what we have been taught. And by introducing education to someone in a non-judgmental way, that makes it more welcoming. It makes it less threatening, like, oh, am I a bad parent? It's so many things that happens when we have to work with families in those interpersonal relationships.
Thank you for your responses. I have another question that is similar, and I think it'll touch on very similar themes that we all touched on already. And it is, how is it best to approach a parent who has a child not yet diagnosed, but is suspected to possibly be on the autism spectrum without insulting the family? And Brittany, I'm going to give it right back to you.
I'm someone who's very direct. I'll be very honest. I'm very direct, but I'm very compassionate. I have a lot of empathy and love in my approach when I'm working with people. And one of the things I really do focus on is relationship building. And relationship building is about rupture and repair. So the call and response, as you're building up that connection with the parent and you're planting seeds to talk about things, like you get to know the parent, you learn the parent's learning style a little bit. You have to really take out time to really understand who you're communicating with and understand what they have going on. Maybe soon, right after work, that might not be the best time to introduce this topic. It may be, let's have a sit down meeting at a different time. But of course, that also includes making sure there's enough staff and all those other things. But I won't go down that rabbit hole today. But it's one of those things where you really have to focus on the relationship of things when you're wanting to deliver information, but also you have to be comfortable with those difficult conversations to yourself, of knowing that you're not coming from a space of harm by communicating something. But then also making sure you're educated enough. If you don't feel like you're the best person to deliver the information, seek support. Seek out help from others that may have done this already. Consult with someone, hire a consultant, just find a way to communicate.
I think it's really interesting when you said, you know, they might have had a hard day at work. Don't talk to them at that point about something very intense. So to pick up on that, I would say meet them where they're at. People tend to want to talk, so so try and find out what's on their mind. Get to what's on the parents' mind. Find out like what's bugging them at the time that they don't want, it feels inappropriate to talk about at that space. And then you'll build that trust where they go, oh, this person really wants to know what's going on in my life. It's all about connecting with the parent and building trust. And I think particularly parents, I can speak for myself, of a kid who's autistic, I want to be asked questions about my kid in particular, like, because he's peculiar. I mean, he's funny, and I want them to ask, why is he doing that? So the more questions, I keep thinking that that's the way to get to know the kid through the parent, is just asking the parent questions, asking the kid questions. And I want to go back to the earlier question too, about how to connect with these kids. Very often they have really peculiar interests. Like my daughter, when she was growing up, was typical. My wife was like, oh, play tea parties with her because you'll connect with her. And I did. They were boring without me. I just said, but she went on and on, and I went on and on, bored, but we connected. But this boy, my son, it's not even boring. It's like I don't know what he's talking about. Like he has some video game with more than 100 characters, and he knows the details about each one of them. And he'll tell me on and on and on and on, and I'll just sit there going. And then you ask me questions, and I go, I can't remember all that. But the point is now he's connected with me. So that's the way to do it. Like let them connect with you. And actually, it's good when they're telling you these things, they're sharing. So you're connecting, even though it sounds so like, I don't know what he's talking about, but you've connected on an emotional level. I hope that I'm trying to give you ways to connect with both the parents and the kids. I found that it's the interests they have can be so abstract, and the questions they have, but give it a shot. Like with him once, I remember he started asking me why. There are a lot of why questions, incessant. So I said, let me sit and take however long it took to keep going with the why. And I'm not exaggerating. The why went all the way back to, I don't know, there could be a God, or there's something called the Big Bang. I don't know why we exist. It literally went from like, why is your pen like that to that? So, questions.
I think, I don't have a data percentage on this, but I would say that most of the families that I've worked with, they know. And I think what we can do is, you all can be doing as providers is reflection. So it could be an amazing experience to be raising a child and you have some ideas about maybe this, maybe that. Is this typical? Is this not? Especially with this group, because I think we're talking about really pretty young kids. That moment in which someone recognizes that and offers to join in with you, and that is, you're sort of invited in. And it's more about an exploration in the conversation as opposed to, even in the context of my work doing diagnostics or writing treatment plans for kids, it's about exploration in the relationship with this family. It's not about, I know this and I need to tell you this. And I think it's a kind way to be able to start those conversations. Not everybody signs up for parenting, and you certainly don't sign up for the kid who shows up. I have 2 young adult children that I've raised as a single parent. And I'm still shaking my head a little bit like this is who you are. And I think that that's common for a lot of folks. You don't know who's going to show up. There's no guarantee that development will go in a certain direction. So I think that companioning is a really important part. And as listening to you, Ray, too, I think when you talk about some of these strategies, isn't it interesting? They're exactly the same for the parents as they are for the kids. Show which, join where people are interested, go with topics that sort of light them up. Many years ago, a mentor, family child care provider said to me, you'll make it through your day if you do things you love, and then you invite kids to join you. So I took my curriculum, I threw it out, and I said, we're going to start gardening. We're going to start doing things during the day where we can really make that connection with each other. One other thing I thought about too is, as a provider, finding ways to have times that you have separate from kids to be able to talk with parents, because there's no time in your day and there's no time at the beginning and no time at the end. So doing things like 12-week conferences or even meeting a couple times a year, I think opens that space for the adults to be able to have adult conversations.
When you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. We can be radically different. Number one thing I tell parents is please, and don't try to offend, but stay off the Bobby blogs that say you need to have a perfect child with this attendance and this test score in order for them ever to succeed. I will tell you that's a rabbit hole you never want to go down, because it will only make you feel like I have failed as a parent. No, you have not failed as a parent. You have a neurodiverse child. Brains are multiple ways. There is not one way to think. There's not one way to do things. We're trying to put people into an education system where they put them into blocks instead of focusing on what the child is good at. So now we have a child who comes home thinking they're not good at anything. That's not going to be real helpful. As for how to talk to the parents, realize they've got maybe 5 minutes tops. Texts work well. Things in writing work well. Why? Because they can be gone back to later. So you don't have to try and remember, along with the grocery list, what's for dinner, what your kid will eat, what you want to make, what you will eat, and how to get everything else done and possibly be able to watch The Bachelorette or whatever junk TV show you happen to watch. At the same point, you're not going to have 8 million seconds to do everything. So make sure that something is written down so you have some object of permanence. And additionally, just make sure they feel that they are not alone. If they want to talk about anything, just do it and model the behavior. Ask questions that you would want to be asked. For example, no one is going to want to be asked, where is he on the developmental chart at this time when it's not a parent-teacher conference? Not everything is going to be moving the needle developmentally. Sometimes kids need to play because playing is learning. those are things we have to realize that not everything will be clinical.
Thank you for your responses. Those were the 2 questions I had in the how to talk with parents, how to partner with them. I want to check in at this point to see if any questions have popped into your head and you've written them down.
So my question is this, like if I am just sharing with the parent what I am observing during the day, should the parent be bothered by these comments?
That is
Sharing what I
a
observed during the day?
I think you never know what a person's life experience has been and what their response may be, but I still think it's important to start those conversations, even though sometimes they're a little bit uncomfortable. And that's why I think the whole relationship building that we do with families is so important, because it's within those good relationships that sometimes we have to talk about things that are a little different way of thinking, a little uncomfortable, but I still think it's really, really valuable to go ahead with that. I think though, being prepared for a response that maybe we didn't expect. You know, I've spent a lot of time in situations where people come in for a diagnosis and you have a day's worth of time with them and trying to be very thoughtful about what that impact may be. And also giving people time to come back to the conversation. You might have it once, you might have it twice, 3 times or 4 times. But I think for childcare providers, we have this continuity and long-term relationship that I think sometimes, you know, one parent told me what kind of waffles to buy, and that was not my choice. So there has to be some exchange of, I think this way, you think this way, but I think your intentions are so positive because the whole point is for both parents and providers to be supporting and doing the best, creating the best environment that they can for this child. So I encourage people to go there, even sometimes when it's hard.
What makes it easy for me to talk to other parents is by sharing my experience of my child who's autistic. So I say, this is what he does. And they look at me, they go, oh, mine does that too, you know. So I misunderstood, but that's a trick that I have because I have a child like that. Yeah.
As someone with invisible physical disabilities, I have a mild form of cerebral palsy that you're not going to necessarily notice right away. There are things that I will pick up and I will see. And I've learned that unless I know the situation well, unless I am in a specific position, I don't bring it up unless they bring it up, because it looks like I'm watching them. And that really tends to weird people out. I don't know if there's a clinical definition of that, but it just does. And so I found that instead of just trying to immediately relate, it's just, okay, I know it. I'm not going to say anything. Doesn't mean I'm ashamed, but if someone asks, then absolutely. Additionally, on physical disabilities, what we need to do and teach children is it's okay to ask questions. What Ray said is absolutely right. There are so many people who stare because they don't understand, but they're told don't look. So then they learn nothing on disability and learn to be afraid of it.
I think it's okay to ask the question. And I think that one of our practices that we have to get comfortable with is being able to accept when someone rejects our offer to help or our suggestion and be okay with it. Sometimes some people are not ready to hear it, and that's okay. The purpose of it, your intention was to share some insight or some love or some kindness or some education with that person. And so, but sometimes people are just not in the space to receive the information. When I do therapy, I always talk about how we always have pieces of the puzzle. And sometimes as a therapist, my job is just to support that person with putting the pieces together. And for all of us as providers and people interact with other people all the time, we may have a piece of the puzzle that that person is looking for. And if we just share it with that person, in time, they will make that connection.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for your responses. We are going to get into this broad topic about culture and how culture impacts autism, access to treatment. And my first question that I have on here for our panel members, we're going to start with Molly. How does culture affect autism diagnosis and access to treatment?
I think we're living in a time in which access to healthcare in general is available to some people and not available to others. And we see that same process kind of unfold with developmental diagnosis as well. I've spent a lot of time as a birth to 3 provider, as a special education teacher in families' homes, and I chose to do work in homes because that felt to me like a really important education for me to get into the, I couldn't always have the same history or experience as that family, but I felt like something about the power shifted when I was in their home, welcomed into their home, paying attention to their language, paying attention to their customs, being invited to meals. That as a provider, gave me an opportunity to say, how do I take what I am observing here and learning from this family and then apply that to the expertise that I've spent all these years working on? And some things I kept and some things I left behind. I think particularly language makes a huge difference to come in to a predominantly English-speaking medical system, to attempt to look at the complexity of human development, and then trying to figure out how do we even communicate well about this? What do we know about your family's understanding of disability? How does your culture view disability? I had one situation where when I was working at birth to 3, I was younger, so I've learned with one family, I was really for a 2-year-old, I was pushing for independence. And the dad finally sat me down and he said, she's our baby. We're not interested in independence right now. And I'm like, I never even thought of that, but I've carried it with me over the years that I can't make assumptions that my priorities as a teacher, as a diagnostician, as a behavior analyst, I can't make those assumptions. I have to live and be willing to really listen into where those priorities are. Because if you listen to parents' priorities, their culture will be revealed. I don't have to go in and say awkwardly, so tell me how your culture thinks about disability. I have to be able to find a way to join so that I could find, I guess, those overlapping or places that are common between us. Because the point there is not for me to spread my expertise around. The point of me being there is to help this family figure out what those next steps will be for them.
So I have a lot to say about this. A lot more just because of my experience as a parent, but also as a provider too. So I provide therapy to a lot of adults who was diagnosed later in life because no one recognized it from several levels culturally. I think about someone I'm supporting who is from the area and her mother missed some of the signs of autism with her because it was like, oh, she's just different. She just likes different things, and not being able to have like that education space of like having someone be able to say, well, kids don't always stay up all night and read 20 chapters 2 days in a row. Like, let's think about that, right? And it was just like, she's just smart, right? She's just really focused. And so it will be like always like uplifting, which we want to come from that strength perspective. But at times we have to be able to acknowledge when something does seem different. And as a parent myself that has a daughter, I'll be honest, y'all, this is fresh. I might cry. So my daughter is going to be 14 this year. She just got her diagnosis like 2 months ago. And I have been advocating very hard to in all sources. I didn't participate in like first to three program. And I think the catch-22 is my daughter has severe ADHD. So that dual diagnosis. And so she talks at people. And so she is like, oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. And she has an amazing personality. And she will talk your ear off for real. And so people would miss, oh, she is social. And for me, I didn't even know. Like, I've been doing this work for 5 years. And before this, I was working with adults with developmental disability. And even I didn't even catch that social cue that she wasn't really engaging in back and forth conversation. It was, she would talk at you. I want to go get my nails done. I want to go learn how to braid. I need a mannequin. Those are all her interests. She'll have nails here, braid, mannequin here, like it's a million projects over there. And then she'd be like, okay, I'm done. And literally, I didn't know until the provider came to me and was like, and so this is like when you and I are engaged in conversation, we're going back and forth. But I noticed that she stops after a couple sessions of going back and forth. And then she pointed out like how my daughter over accessorizes. And as a 14-year-old, you don't always see that. And so I was like, she would have like a necklace on with 12 Hello Kitty things out there. And it was just like, those are things that you see. And then, and you just like, oh, she just likes buttons. And I mean, I was just like, she liked buttons. She liked collecting buttons. That's it. But then at the same time, I noticed her the sensory sensitivity. And at the age of 14, she can't be in certain spaces too long. Or soon as her cream cheese go from cold to hot or hot to cold, she can no longer eat it. And I kept pushing, and I don't know how many providers, how many school districts that I've been in that just said, I don't see it. I don't see it. It's behavioral. So my daughter's IEP focused on a social emotional development, which was nice to get an IEP when they finally approved it, but her IEP didn't help her with her occupational therapy, with speech, with all of these things that she actually needed help with. So now at 14, we're backtracking, doing all of these different things. And even that is a whirlwind of things, because even some of these providers don't even take certain insurances. So then you think about parents who is a single parent who can't take off from work, and they got to dedicate almost 8 hours or 2 full days to go to doctor's appointments and sit in those meetings, but no one's given extra funding anywhere. You still don't qualify for certain benefits. It's so many things that goes into it. But to highlight more on the cultural thing too, language barriers is a huge thing. I feel like for me, when I would go into the doctor's office, I would have to code switch and be like, oh, let me say it this way because they're going to understand it better. But if I said it in more of like slang or just explaining what I was seeing at home, the providers didn't get it. So then I would have to go and research, oh, if I say this word means this word means that, so that I can make sure that the doctor understood what I was saying. And I shouldn't have to work that hard to make sure they are understanding me.
I come about this in a different perspective as a white, straight female who is Jewish, disabled both, and has invisible disabilities. There are certain things that will apply, and there are certain things that will not necessarily apply. The one that bothers me the most is the doctors and nurses who will speak to my mother rather than to me. At 44, I'm choosing to bring my mother as a note taker because I can't write it down. that does not mean I can't understand it. Having a discussion solely with and assuming the person doesn't understand what you're saying is something that is an insult. It doesn't matter what culture you are on that particular one. And it is offensive. As for what you were saying, that sounds like your daughter sounds like my teenage hood of, I will tell people what to do. Laura, you probably understand, Laura's on the school board with me. I don't converse back and forth. Well, I diatribe, I talk, I make a statement, and then I have to realize that I have to wait in line before I can speak again. This is a concept that is completely and utterly foreign, that has taken 7 years to realize that I don't need to shout over absolutely everyone in the room. But what we're realizing why this is on culture is because girls my age in their 40s were not diagnosed with ADHD as often as boys, and we were not diagnosed with autism. Therefore, we have a bunch of women in their late 30s, early 40s, who are realizing that it isn't them that was broken, that they are normal human beings who think differently, but the system didn't realize who they were. So it's a whole different ballgame when you're not diagnosed based on gender. Oh, this person talks, when you said your daughter talks incessantly, I understand completely. I lost my only friend in middle school. Why? Because I was told to be honest. She said I could, okay, can you run my student body president campaign? I said, sure, but I can't vote for you. The other guy is better. I had no concept. None. That's not, well, she said she wanted me to be honest. That was honest. Needless to say, okay, maybe that's a little too honest. There was never a discussion on that. And suddenly my mother's in counseling, my father's in coaching, and both of them looked at each other like, oh, we forgot about that. I said,
Culture is such a huge word. I didn't know where to begin, but the question, how does culture affect autism diagnosis and access to treatment? I think culture means so many things. I've lived in India. I grew up there. I lived in Berlin and Amsterdam and lived in New York for a long time. And I'm no expert in culture, even though my business, my entire career was in communication, where I had to know how people are speaking, what their belief systems are, what are their values. So from a national boundary, cultural point of view, autism has been seen is very different. And again, I can't be generalizing, right? There's no way I can say they're one way in Germany and another way in Amsterdam. So I can talk to you about my personal experience, which is, and it's connected to the spectrum of honesty to indirectness, for lack of a better word. I don't know if I want to say honesty to dishonesty. And these international cultures have those spectrums, as they do in America, I find, between New York and, let's say, the Midwest, where it's much more direct in New York. I'm very circumspect here, so I'm very confused at times. Nicki doesn't confuse me.
I was raised by New York.
But so culture to me boils down to that, like the directness or the indirectness. So the openness, because of the directness, was huge in Amsterdam, where it's like, all right, autism is a thing, let's figure it out, go with it. That's just what it is. Whereas in India, let's pretend like he's not autistic. Let's not tell your mom, because she'd be really upset. Like, she'll be upset. We need help. She needs to know about her grandson. You see, so cultural differences about what to say, what not to say, hugely significant. In New York, we talked about it easily. Over here, it's much more stigmatized, oddly enough. And I didn't expect that. I thought that, with its extreme reputation for being liberal, would be like, yeah, man, he's autistic. But it's like parents don't want to admit that. I'm like, why not? It's not a stigma. It's what it is. It is what it is. Like, let's just deal with it, right? So the culture boils down to me to, is it what you assess it for its degree of openness. I don't want to judge it by saying honest and dishonest, but degree of directness or openness, right? So assess what that family's culture is, regardless of national boundary. Each family could have a different culture. My wife's family was, my mother-in-law refuses to accept that there's something up. She goes, he's great, he's perfect. I'm like, all right. So you don't want to do the work to help, I guess. Anyway, I'm just saying it's that, right? That's the cultural aspect, boils down to the degree of openness and acceptance. So as caretakers, it's up to us to assess the parents and the family's culture and adapt to it, yes, but you as the professional, as the helper, as the good human being there, you have to trust your gut. You have to keep going inward, try not to be judgmental, but keep trusting your gut that you believe something's off despite what someone else's culture may be. And you could come across perhaps as culturally insensitive, which is what my brother called me once. But you got to do what you got to do, right? You just got to follow up with trusting your gut that there's something that you want to face and help. So roundabout answer about culture, but I feel like it's a very roundabout question. So I tried my best.
Thank you. And I just have, I want to ask this question to you, Brittany, because I know we had a great conversation about this earlier, is how does systemic racism factor into autism treatment? I know you talked about your daughter and the delay in becoming diagnosed. So anything you want to add to that?
Systematic racism really intervenes with treatment because of access. And I will acknowledge that I'm an educated Black woman that has a decent paying job. So I have this privilege of being able to get access to certain things, but I know that I support a lot of families who do not. And so access is number one, but then the bias in treatment, the bias in research, and what autism looks like and how we label it, and when research is done, how our brains interpret those things from how our brains interpret when we see someone who might look like us with different behaviors, our brain lights up a lot more. So when we see someone who does not look like us and they're having certain behaviors, and we have a group of people who's associated with being bad, in quotation marks, right? Our brain would say, this is a behavioral issue. This is not a developmental issue, right? This is this, and we don't ask further questions. No one's asking the extra questions about how was your pregnancy? And even just providing education. Like sometimes people really struggle with the idea, and providers really struggle with the idea of like what we call lead-in. Like if you say something, then they're gonna say yes to it. But oftentimes the systematic racism hasn't always put people in a place to have the education to be able to say, oh, my pregnancy wasn't supposed to be like that. Oh, I wasn't supposed to be that swollen when I was pregnant. Oh, I wasn't supposed to have whatever it is that has happened during that pregnancy time and during those toddler years and those early infancy years. And having someone just provide that education piece is so important. But I definitely felt like systematic racism really intervened, because I don't know how many times I sat in a meeting with schools saying, oh, let's sit down and come up with a behavioral plan for your daughter. And, oh, you should go into this parenting class. I teach parenting classes. What? And the meeting was 15 minutes at that. They gave me 15 minutes to tell me how I need to do better. They didn't even give me 30 minutes. I'm being triggered right now. But it was just like, they didn't even take out the time. So like, we know it's a you problem. It's an in-home problem. So we're gonna put it back on you to fix. and give you very limited resources to do it. I think about the healthcare system and how we, like people of color and Black folks, have not always been able to be in a space where we feel welcome. I know like when I go spaces, I'm like, I don't always feel welcome, and I don't know how to change that. And if I have to add in other perspective of like my partner being from a different country as well, of like, I would have to translate for him if he says something and maybe he's not pronouncing the word properly. So now he doesn't want to speak anymore in the doctor's office. So now he doesn't want to go into the space anymore with us. Because he's like, I don't want to have to explain anything. They're not gonna give me, and I don't want to get upset. And then all of a sudden he's like the angry Black man because y'all are not listening. That's what I say. You have to learn to listen. Even with someone with an accent, you can hear it. You can hear what they're saying if you take time to listen. And so that's another way that systematic racism, because English is everywhere. And we never think about that. One of the things that I always tell providers now is that from that language perspective is that my partner will wake up and speak in a different language all the time. And I'm like, they don't dream in English. He does not dream in English. He dreams in his first language. And we have to recognize that and understand that when we're going into spaces, once you learn that someone may be offering something, whether they are from the BIPOC community, you as a provider have to do your best to provide empathy, meet them where they're at. I think about my kid's doctor, the reason why I like him so much. He is a white doctor, but one of the things he always asks me when we're there is, how has systematic racism affected you and your child? And that's something that he does personally. He asks that question. He does not have to ask that question, but he does. He has made it personalized for the people that's coming to see him, that I can't just put this one fits all shoe on there. It's not much I can do at times because we have insurance companies that control certain things. We have like contracts that control certain things. And with that, you as the provider giving that direct care, then how can you be the best version of yourself to kind of combat systematic racism and that when it affects people with autism?
Thank you for being so open and sharing that, Brittany. We have a lot of, I know, questions that people probably have a lot more they want to say, but I want to pause here and just check in, see if anyone has any questions about culture and how that plays into autism diagnosis and access to treatment.
I have been in this position of having to talk to a parent about or talking to children about with autism. And it is, I think culture is a big factor here. I can talk about my own culture, the Hispanic culture, where we do not, many times the parents do not accept that the child has a problem. And I like to see it as a need, that child has a need, and parents refuse to accept that. So it is, sometimes it's hard to share those concerns or to be open at the moment that just to share those concerns. I've been in this position about having to talk to the parents about my concerns, and it is really extremely hard for them to accept. What you find is mostly a denial, and you have to talk and keep talking to these parents. And many times there has been cases in which even like the government have to be involved to be the ones who talk to the parents.
Thank you for that. I'm going to transition us into the third section, caring for children with autism, because as a lot of what we're talking about, this is classified as a developmental disability, but really we should call it a developmental difference. What are some techniques that you can do in your programs to support peer relationships for children with autism?
Okay, so some of the things I have used, at least for my daughter, is I talked to one of her friends, and her friend is really, really close with each other. And I was like, I cannot do this by myself. Like, she got a project here, there, over there. And so I was just like, no, I'm not about to constantly be the person having to correct her behavior. And so one of the things I did for myself was to promote self-care. Is I paid one of her friends, because one, is not her friend's job to help my daughter clean her room, but I paid one of her friends to be alongside with my daughter to help her organize her room. And it worked. Like, it was spotless, y'all. It was so beautiful. And the stuff is still hanging up right now. Like, it's really beautiful. And so that was one of the things I used to kind of support my daughter with this, is like bringing in other people. Like, it really takes a village, and if we're afraid to ask for help, we end up like causing more harm for ourselves, causing compassion fatigueness and burnout. And self-care is really important when caring for someone who has different abilities, because you can get really exhausted. They will be really exhausted. I know my daughter tired of me some days. And so just from that perspective, like, we both need that break. And by bringing someone else into the space, it really allows that partnership and community and love to flourish. So then that way I can go and have fun with my daughter, instead of having to come home and say, oh, this is not done right, let's go back and do this. I can just come in the house and say, okay, let's go to the movies, or you can do my nails now.
I'll keep this short because I think it's been a really important part of work that I've done and all the various jobs that I've had, is coming to the place of understanding that participation matters more than skill. That early childhood in particular is the place in which kids are still forming their thoughts about the world. They understand that people speak different languages. They're good at reading nonverbal communication. So really going after that. We used to play something called Boss of the Day, and it wasn't me, but there were parts of our day where one of the kids would be chosen to sort of be the boss of whatever the activity was. And then so if you're pairing that kind of, if the child with autism is boss at the Play-Doh table, and the kids are in a position of then seeing how valuable that is, because doesn't everybody want to be friends with the boss who has access to really fun and cool toys? But that we don't have an expectation that in order to participate, kids are going to all do it the same. So reading kids' cues, little kids are actually pretty good at doing this, even small toddlers, they read nonverbal communication, and you can use that as a second language. If it, like somebody mentioned, if a child walks away and they want to play alone, respect that. Find a way to teach kids to respect each other in whatever way that they're communicating.
I'm going to give the opposite. And the reason why is because I learned how to read body language exactly 7 years ago when I got out of school board. I had no idea that body language, it's not that I didn't know the concept existed. I had no idea people rolled their eyes. I had no idea people got visually annoyed when I was speaking. I had no clue that I was going on and boring the living heck out of people. I apologize to all my colleagues over that. But very, very simply, peer relationships are huge. My mother also paid a friend of mine to help out. She gave up on the entire bedroom thing. She decided that was a lost cause. However, the forgetting my school books 8 million times or losing 37 keys in one semester of college, I did. 37 in one semester. So yeah, there's a reason they're around my neck. Very, very simply, you have to model the behavior you want to see. Now, not every kid is going to want a parent with them, so you try and get to know. There's always going to be one kid who's friends with more of the adults. Those are the ones you try to focus with. With me, I had the double-edged sword of being an only child and an only grandchild, which meant my grandparents gave me whatever I wanted, so my mother had to put the kibosh on that pretty quick of, no, she has to do this herself. Because culturally, in the Jewish household, what you want is what you got. Well, that's not a good idea to give someone with the impulse control of a small gnat unlimited access to funds. Bad idea. So what instead I found with peers is one, a group that discusses finances. Because very simply, the first time we get a credit card, we're going shopping. I'm sorry, but we are. Debit cards actually happen to be a good thing because you can only spend so much. And that helps. Number two, find things that have common activities that people will. Not all of us know how to make friends. People think that it's a commonplace behavior. Some of us, it works very well. Some of us don't, like me, do not shut up no matter what. And I could tell you growing up, if someone wanted to kill me or someone loved me, that was it. Anything in between, heavens knows, I have no idea. Missed it completely. And then it was like, oh, that's why? I had no idea. So what you need to do is go from their strengths. If the kid likes chess, we need a chess club. Kid likes dance, let's try and find a dance group and try to learn the norms that way. And sometimes they have to be pointed out. Sometimes you need another person to say, hey, did you notice that when so-and-so does this, they walk away from you? Why do they walk away? Oh, they walk away from me? I had no idea.
I just want to thank our panel members for taking the time to come and join us and talk about a lot of these concepts that that are really challenging to have discussions about sometimes. And I think they're really important. And I hope that you all gain so much from this series. And thank you so much for your participation.